What is going on, everybody? I am back today to talk about a new Shudder original movie, and I just recently discussed As Real. So Shudder has been putting out some releases recently, and I have heard a ton about this movie, especially when it first debuted at some festival circuits. This is a French horror movie, and the big thing I heard about is how they tried to shoot this film to make it look like it was shot in one continuous take. And anytime you go in to watch a movie like that, you wonder like how much of it is going to feel gimmicky or how much of it just feels like an intentional artistic choice. And so I'm always kind of skeptical, but I look forward to seeing how it's executed because getting something to look like it takes place in one continuous shot is very, very difficult. You have to pay a lot of time and attention to detail to make sure it's executed accurately. And the movie I'm going to be telling you about today is MadS. MadS is directed by David Moreau. A teenager stops off to see his dealer to test a new drug before heading off for a night of partying. On the way home, he picks up an injured woman and the night takes a surreal turn. So, I was really excited to watch this movie after hearing a lot of the hype around it, and I thought this movie was great. I really enjoyed it a lot. I do think it has some flaws and some problems. I think if you're looking for great horror movies that were released in 2024, this is one that you need to see. The execution is absolutely incredible. The performances here were great, and it's a different take on something that we've seen before, and I'm very excited to tell you about it today. So at the beginning of the movie, we are introduced to Romain, and he is at some friend's house, and we see him doing drugs, and he's buying drugs for a party that we learn later on it is his birthday, and he's going to a party for his birthday, and he gets in his car, and he's driving down the road, and he sees this woman on the side of the road, and she's bandaged all over the place, and she's like freaking out, and he puts her in the front seat of his car, and he starts trying to drive her to the hospital, and she has a Zoom recorder with her, and she hits play on it, and we hear some guys talking, and it seems like she has come from some sort of scientific lab and is infected with something that is causing her to have violent, aggressive behavior, and so we are assuming zombie, and she ends up freaking out in the car, and he ends up taking her back to his house, and what he sees completely and totally shocks him, and the entirety of the film is his girlfriend eventually comes around. He has to try to play off everything as normal and how the night continues on from that point. So, like I said, I thought this movie was incredibly impressive, and I'll start with what everybody's talking about, the continuous take. They did a phenomenal job. I think they said they ended up shooting this movie in like 5 or 6 separate takes, but it flows very seamlessly. They do a really great job overlapping the takes so that it does feel like it is shot in one continuous motion. And what I like about that is, coming from a film school background, one of the things that you get when a camera cuts away is you get to breathe as an audience member. When you're shooting something in a continuous take, you aren't giving the audience the ability to have a moment to breathe. You are in that moment and you have to experience everything that those characters are experiencing. And we're so used to in film having shot, reverse shot, or a lot, like even if you look at big budget like Marvel movies, the editing is just like so chaotic. You don't ever really hold on a shot. It's like cut, 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 cut. So to have a movie where you are going to sit with these people for so long, they're clearly trying to build a feeling for you as a viewer, and that feeling is anxiety. And the movie does a very great job building that anxiety. I don't want to give too much away, but there's a really awesome scene where our lead character, he's at a party, and the security alarm goes off at his house, and his house is like a block away from the party, and they're about to call the police, and he's like on the phone with the security company, like riding his bike, trying to get them not to call the police, and it's just very tense and overwhelming and anxiety inducing. And I think the director did a really phenomenal job building that tension for you as an audience member, and that's something that I really appreciated. This is clearly a different take on zombie movies, but I really like it because it's obviously implied that they are some kind of zombie with how they are acting, but it's done in a way that's different enough that it feels like its own unique thing. There isn't a ton of gore in this movie because it's very difficult to showcase practical effects in a movie where you can't cut away. You literally have to be putting makeup on people in another room and kind of shell them out really quickly to make it work. But what I like is how much violence is implied and how much disturbing material is implied through the visuals here. And that's what I liked. It just sent chills up my spine thinking about this situation and how just uncomfortable this whole thing would be. And I liked that a lot about the movie. The actors in this do a phenomenal job. They feel like real people, and I think that's what makes the movie work so very well. And the film constantly leaves you questioning, like, everyone in this movie is doing drugs. So the whole time you're watching the movie, you're like, is can I believe any of what's going on in front of me? And I think that's what makes the film so incredibly effective, is that the entire time you're watching the movie, you're asking yourself the question, can I even believe this? Is any of it actually real, or is the director trying to play a trick on me? And that's what made the movie so special. I love movies that when you're watching them, that you have to constantly ask questions like, what am I seeing here? What am I supposed to take away from this? And I liked that a lot about this movie. I will say there are some perspective shifts in the movie that I was not the biggest fan of. I understand why they had to happen, but I do think they can be a little jarring, and it made it feel a little repetitive. Like, it lost me a little bit in the middle section of the movie. I felt like the tension and the anxiety that was building throughout kind of had a lull, and then it picked up again in the third act and really kind of had my attention. But there's like a 15 to 20-minute segment in the middle of the movie that, it's hard to complain sometimes, because you're like, okay, well, if you're put in that situation, what would you do? And I don't necessarily know exactly the changes that I would make, but I feel like if there was some tweaks to it, I would have thought this movie was a masterpiece. But there's just so much in the middle segment of the movie that kind of pulled my attention, that I wasn't necessarily as invested as I was at the beginning or in the tail end. But despite those qualms, I think the film as a whole is incredibly impactful and effective. And obviously, it's a spin on something that you've seen 100 times. This concept is not new. It's not doing something that you haven't necessarily seen before, but it's doing it in a different enough way to make it exciting and compelling. And I love when Shudder gets movies like this that are very different from the norm. I think of something like Skinamarink, when you're just getting this really super avant-garde film that like is not going to sit well with majority of audiences. And that's what I love so much about Shudder as a company, is they just let people do what they want. And I think so many studios should allow directors that type of creative freedom. And Shudder's just like, hey, we'll give you some money and we'll promote your film because we have faith in it. And I think that's really neat. And as someone who loves horror, seeing movies like this get made, it's incredibly exciting. And I think if you're looking for something really thrilling and compelling to watch, this movie will definitely check mark that box for you. So have you seen MadS? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. I thought this movie was great. I really enjoyed it, and I'm already looking forward to watching it again. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.